Hey players and playettes, your player partner Sticks here, back for another quick review. Today we're going to be talking about Neo The World Ends With You. Neo The World Ends With You is the highly anticipated sequel of the original The World Ends With You, which came out on 3DS. Neo The World Ends With You released on June 25th, 2021, and it is published by Square Enix and developed by Square Enix in association with Hand. That's H.A.N.D. I had a good time with this game. My playthrough took about 120 hours, and in those 120 hours, I went through a range of emotions. I laughed, I cried, I was angry for a period of time. But the story of this game is centered around two friends named Rindo and Fret from Shibuya. Shibuya, Japan, it's pretty lively out there, and these kids are just two hipsters trying to find their way. Rindo plays this game called Fango, which is kind of like Pokemon Go, and Fret is just into finding the ladies and being a cool dude. They live in a realm called the RG, which is the real world. And as they're going through their day, they actually wind up getting offered some magic pins, which takes them to another world called the UG. The UG is actually the underworld for the most part, and the pins basically made the kids die. When they died, they wind up in something called the Reaper's game, and the Reaper's game is a sadistic kind of game where this group called the Reapers basically makes players play to find a winner using powers, and they're playing under the threat of erasure. So more or less, they will get erased from existence if they don't win the Reaper's game. If they do win the Reaper's game, they will get a wish. So the organization for the Reaper's game is basically taking these kids and separating them into teams. Rindo and Fret wind up on a team called the Wicked Twisters, and then there are three other factions: the Pure Hearts, the Runebringers, and the Deep River Society. Over the course of the game, you do wind up meeting other players, adding them to your team, including Nagi, who plays this game called Elegant Strategy Online. She's like a pervert who just is in love with anime characters. She's a weeb. And over the course of the game, you meet more friends and basically just try to find your way through this Reaper's game. Few twists and turns, but not so many. So the gameplay for this game, you wind up in a team starting with two, Rindo and Fret, but as you go through the game, obviously you get more teammates, and these teammates will give you more abilities. The way that the battle structure is worked up, it's free roaming battles, but the battle system is actually very unique. I like the battle system in this game a lot because it's very much melee combat or magic based, but what you do is you assign a pin to your character. So each character will be assigned a pin. The pin will have a different elemental magic and then a different spell. It could be a charging spell, it could be an attack spell, it could be a projectile spell. It usually corresponds with the button press. There'll be certain types with certain button presses. So what you do is you assign your teammates a button press, and then you engage with combos basically using those attacks without using all of your pin's energy. When you use those combos, you'll build what's called a groove meter. And as you build that groove meter, you'll eventually get to 100% where you can use a beat drop. Well, actually, when you're filling your groove meter, you will be able to do beat drops. You get to a certain point of groove using your attacks, you complete a combo, then you do a beat drop. And every time you do a beat drop, it will get you a higher amount of your entire groove meter. And once your groove meter gets to 100%, you will be able to unleash a special attack that corresponds to the element of your pins. Yes, I know it sounds complicated, but I promise you, once you get the hang and the flow of the game, it's not that big of a deal. So the combat is extremely solid. From the story aspect and how it balances with the combo, the kids wind up getting their own special powers as they go through the story. Rindo can turn back time. Fret can dive or can remind people of things in their memory, and then Nagi can dive into people's minds. And throughout the game, you will be using those powers to solve various issues for people around Shibuya to either advance the story or to complete subquests. The subquests, they do add a little bit of value and a little bit of character to the story, but ultimately, I would say they're not fleshed out enough to really be worth anything except for the extra friendship points that you will get for completing them. Did I mention friendship points? Friendship points are like a system that you will get for doing encounters and certain missions around that will allow you to increase your social network. When you do increase your social network, you will be given certain buffs like difficulty unlocks, combo buffs, and various pieces of clothing. All in all, I don't think the social network really makes too big of a difference or has a huge impact on the game, but there are definitely some key skills that you will wind up getting from the social network, including the ability to assign pins of the same button press to multiple characters. Towards the end of the game, I do think that is very, very important. I think that's pretty much it for gameplay. Yeah, on the graphics. So the graphics in this game, they're cel shaded. If you know me, you know I love a cel shaded game. You can't really do it wrong. Now again, I played through Neo on the Switch, so it's not as smooth as it was on the PlayStation demo when I played it, because that one's running at a locked 60 frames. This Switch version does have a wealth of performance issues, not too many to distract from the game, and at times it will pick up at 60 FPS. So it does seem to just have an uncapped frame rate, but when it's standing still, or sometimes when you're walking up, especially on the handheld on the OLED screen, there were absolute moments of beauty throughout the game. And all of the cutscenes, or at least the ones that were made in CG, use an art style that pops phenomenally with the colors on the OLED and just looks clean in general. And when you actually got to story points where you got to see the characters in motion like that, it was very, very rewarding. As far as the sound design, I think the sound was really great. The characters did a lot of speaking. They did have voice-overing for the entirety of the game as far as dialogue and even in-game, in-battle commentary. The soundtrack was mostly rock and roll and Japanese pop, but it was an extensive soundtrack, and you could find CDs around the city that you would be able to use to add more tracks to it. In fact, as far as the shopping in the game, you were able to stack yen inside of your pouch in there, and there was a lot of shops that will let you buy pins, clothing, music, and books. Ultimately, not all of these were necessary. I never really found the value of the clothing system, but I will say that it was fun to just go around town and buying stuff. For the most part, it's kind of just a collectible thing. They do give you a grid that will show you what you've collected if you want to 100% the game, but in my experience with it, it wasn't necessary at all. Sound is really good though. Well, now it's time for the rating. So overall, I would give this game an 8 out of 10. The gameplay is very memorable. The characters are great. It has a great music selection, but I did feel like towards the end, it overstayed its welcome, just because there was probably 20 hours of story after you had pretty much seen what the end of the game was going to be. They just kept taking you through it, and that was a bit much for me. Also, a lot of the story involves going back in time and running back through scenes and completing them to a different degree, or using different dialogue options to find new paths. And while that's fun and it advances the story, it made the environments very samey and just didn't offer enough variety in the tour of Shibuya throughout the game. And ultimately that dragged it down a little bit. But I did think this was a great game. I would recommend it to anybody who's got a lot of time on their hands and likes JRPGs, doesn't mind a lot of dialogue. But please understand this is a dialogue heavy game and you're going to do some reading or some listening. Thank you guys for watching. If you've played Neo The World Ends With You, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you thought about the game. If you found this review helpful at all and you might want to consider getting the game based on this review or shitting on it, please let me know in the comments. I'm going to be doing these more often, so I will try to get better at it. But for now, this is what you get. So thank you for watching, and until next time, remember, if you want to get in the game, get on the sticks. Peace.